Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Streamed live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis, and I'm the president and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation. And I'm joined this morning by my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, president and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Tommy. How are you?
Doing well, man. Doing well. It's a great morning again.
Absolutely, man. It's always good to be with you. And it's a beautiful sunny day outside. How has your week been?
It's been great, Eric. We got some good news and some development news. We are working with the Ohio Developmental Disabilities Council. They represent all of the statewide development disabilities agencies across the state. And we shared their results to their DEI survey, and they came back pretty positive.
Okay.
There were some areas for development. But the good news is really that they were looking to put some action behind their gaps.
Okay.
So not just get the results to say, oh, yeah, we kind of knew that, but they didn't say, we don't know what to do.
Right.
And sometimes clients and companies, they kind of throw up their hands with, okay, so what's next?
Right.
What do we do? They didn't say that. They told us, we know what we're going to do. Here are the things we're going to work on. So from a client perspective, the week has been good. I haven't done a lot of work this week, Eric. I don't know. I was kind of in my chair on vacation a lot. So from YouTube video watching to just talking on the phone to a couple of folks that I hadn't talked to for some time, and I was pulling their ear for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And I know I'm not a heavy phone talker. I don't like to talk on the phone too much, but the spirit was calling me to connect with these people. So that's how my week was. It was hot. It was hot. For those who don't know, I was sun-kissed. I went golfing on Wednesday after work just to hit around some stuff, work on a couple of things. And the sun was out to remind us that we have seasons in Ohio. Right. So we have summer, which is hot, just as hot as any other place in the country. Not as much as Phoenix or, Houston, Texas, things like that, but it gets hot. And then it gets cold.
Right.
Not Canada cold, but it gets cold. We get 4 seasons. Right now, we're in the summer season. So I'm enjoying the time off. I'm enjoying the reboot, the regeneration. And that's how my week was.
And I'll tell you that something similar that Tommy, you and I share is that we are both eager workers, and we were built for that. Yeah. As I listen to, and I want you to tell the community a little bit about Bryce and dropping him off, and just that whole thing as well. But we grew up in households where you were built to be a worker and take pride in working. So it's really difficult for us to actually sort of get me time or sort of downtime and embrace that. And so doing that is good for the soul, it's good for the spirit, it's good for the mind. And so I'm glad to hear you say that you just took some time to just sit in the chair, man, and just make a few calls and not measure yourself by how productive was I today around work.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for reminding me of that. More and more, I'm being reminded of being more of a significance with the purpose living life, purpose-driven life than anything else. Sure, finances, it pays the bills. It affords a certain lifestyle, like having a car. In our case, we have 2 cars, right? And again, we don't always purchase a brand new car, it's used, et cetera. But those are the luxuries that we are afforded. But at the end of the day, I promise you that I am still driven by the love that I'm able to give to people who want my love, the love that is returned to me. I'm driven by peace, Eric. I really, really am. I'm driven by the ability and the opportunity to live in peace in so many different ways.
Right.
When I get home, we have our, discussions, sometimes arguments, disagreements, whatever. But at the end of the day, I can wake up and laugh with my family, smile, and enjoy going into work with a new challenge. And so getting my son Bryce off to college, or setting him up, we went to orientation. That was good, down in Greensboro, North Carolina. For those less familiar with Greensboro, it's historically known, particularly in the African-American family community and history, as where 4 freshman boys who attended North Carolina A&T State University decided in their first semester to challenge the status quo. In other words, these 4 freshmen at A&T went to a lunch table, a counter, and decided to sit there until they got served. And racism was prevalent. Systemic racism was the law of the land, and they were refused to be served. A mob formed, and long story short, it literally launched the civil rights movement. My son Bryce is very familiar with this story and the energy of being an advocate, being a leader, being someone that is positively disrupting the status quo. Right. So meaning we can get better.
Right.
We as a community, we as citizens, we as human beings can get better. And Bryce, as he mentioned in his talk with us, he wants to get better. He wants kind people, and I enjoy and respect him.
Right. And I loved hearing him say that last week, really talking about what he was looking for 2 weeks ago. And I'll tell you, so today, so my week, I was, with a client doing diversity training, Tommy, and I did a number of sessions. In the first one, I was getting pummeled. I mean, I was literally getting smacked around, man. I mean, and it was a sister.
Wow.
So, I mean, she's probably got my own gift of ADHD. So, the director of diversity and I were doing a role play, and she was doing a real thorough job with it, man. I was so proud of how well we were demonstrating empathic listening. And this sister just screamed out, man, almost like you were sticking pins in her eyes. Wrap this up. Enough already. Do you do the same thing everywhere? And she just went down from there. And I was just trying to, let me see if I'm understanding. Man, she kept it going for the first third of the class.
Really?
So she was so much into her game that I had to invite her into the hallway, Tom. And the class said, you've been called to the principal's office now. So I took her to the hallway, man. She couldn't even listen in. She just started in. Bruh, I told you last time, make your money. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to, see what's going on. But I say all of that to say this, Tommy, that when things like that occur, I think about the biggest mistake that my clients make is not sort of taking time to reflect on criticisms and attacks in order to understand where the value is in what they're saying.
Yeah.
So it didn't really matter to me. I mean, nobody likes it. Yeah. But when she was going off, then my mind started thinking, okay, what in what she's saying is valid? Mm-hmm. And so what I walked away from that first session with was, I need to redesign right now for the second one. Mm-hmm. Because with adult learners, the most important thing that they have to understand, they have to be able to answer the question of why. Why is the company doing this? And why am I here? And so because you make an assumption, if you've been working with a client for a while, that people know that.
Yeah.
Nope, they do not. So I went on to say, both during her session and later, I asked them, why is your company investing? They didn't have a real good answer. I said, well, number one, they want to be an employer of choice. They want to try to create a great place to work. I said, now that doesn't happen without you all. So I told them, I said, look, I don't have pixie dust, magic wand that I can come in here and wave over your company that says you are now an employer of choice and great place to work. The only people that can do that is you all. And I asked them, why are you here? And many of them were, well, it's mandatory. And then I said, well, let me give you two things to consider. I said, what we see in terms of the reason why you're here, number one, we want to take advantage of your perspective. So we believe that your input and feedback is like literal gold. And I gave them an example of working with Toyota, and team members were telling us, Tommy, that we're not ready to launch the new Camry. And we took that up to the president. They said, look, we got too many new team members, too many new processes. We're not ready. And took it up to the president. That person really wanted to listen to them make the right decision, but they were hearing from sales and finance that we got to get these vehicles out the door. And that ended up costing them, I saw one time, $234 million in recalls as a result of not giving enough weight to the voice of the team member. And I think Boeing is seeing the same thing right now.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say that all the team members are very clear why that's happening, because they've been telling people for a long time. So number one, the reason why you're here is we want to take advantage of your gold. And then number two, we want to give you insights and skills so that you can do your part. And then I asked them, I said, as you all think about, because they were so much bashing management out the gate, I said, let me ask you all this question. If you were to put down percentages, what percentage of your daily challenges are a result of management? And what percentage of your daily challenges are a result of your coworkers? So my mind goes to, what are some questions that are going to surface who you are and make you say something that actually, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a couple said 100% management. It's 100% management. I said, oh, so none of your daily challenges have to do anything with your coworker. I said, so let me ask you all this. If you don't believe that you have to make any changes, if that's where you are, I don't have to make any changes. Well, what right do you have to expect management to make it? Let's just look at this. If you don't have nothing to do, and it's all them, then it sounds like to me that this is gangsterism. Whoever has the biggest stick, pump on the other side. So what are you supposed to get? If we're playing that game, come in with your big stick and let's get it on.
Let's get on. Let's get the whacking. And see who wins.
Don't start complaining. When I'm whacking your head off. Because you ain't got nothing to do. This ain't none of you. And then they get, and so you have to give that to sometimes gangster employees who have nothing but 100% blame. But many of us say, hey, 50-50, sometimes 70-30 employees. So if you got work to do, then that's part of why you're here. Is you got to gain insights and skills so that you can do your part to be the best, because this cannot be a great place to work without all of us doing our part. And so I found that valuable, and so I enjoyed that.
I had a question to ask you, Eric. To go back to the woman who was disruptive in the class, and she had made the comment, trying to help you to make your money, get your money. I've heard that before, particularly from people of color. I connect that same dog whistle comment to what I've heard from majority white or dominant culture individuals, where they might say, I want to feel comfortable, right? So what's the challenge? I just want to feel comfortable. That's the white folks. For the black folks and brown folks, they may say, make your money. For both of those comments, I think they're dog whistles. And I'm going to finish the comment to ask the question here from the person of color to say, make your money. I've always received that as two things. One, first of all, you don't know if I'm getting paid for this. Right? You don't know if I'm getting paid or how much.
Right.
You don't know that.
Right.
Secondly, again, this is my bias and judgment. I don't know if you would say the same thing to the financial auditor, to the IT auditor, right? When we have to upgrade our Microsoft systems.
You don't ask about their money.
No,
question it.
It costs $1.2 million across the enterprise to update it. You don't tell them, make your money. No. So where does that sentiment really come from of, make your money, dog whistle, or I want to feel comfortable, dog whistle?
Yeah, so I think that it's complex. So when I invited her to the hallway, she's, like I said, she's still pummeling. Then I said, sis, I said, I anticipated that I would get some resistance, but I did not anticipate that the ringleader would be someone of color. Mm-hmm. I said, so, help me to understand where that's coming from. I said, now look, I said, here's my, I said, some of the things that you're saying are valid. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to dismiss all those things. I said, but here's what I would ask. I said, I would ask you, if you don't want to do anything, you don't have to. I'm just going to ask you not to drag everybody else down. That's all. Mm-hmm. And she agreed to that. She came back and was actually a model participant. But what I find, Tommy, is that when we stand in front of audiences, employees, the first thing they're doing is they're projecting their frustrations onto us that they have with management. But I did research around why are employees often more negative about toward management, especially in open meetings or in training sessions. And it said because so often they do not have enough opportunities to express themselves. And if they believe that this is an opportunity to surface something of significance, they'll take advantage of that opportunity. And so I don't see it as all. And then a lot of people were saying, nothing's going to change. We've been saying the same things for 20 years and nothing's going to change. And I said, well, you haven't been saying the same things to us. Change, organizational change, cultural change is a 5 to 7 year process. Mm-hmm. I said, and change has happened. And so I had to give a whole education on what all we've done with them that they don't know. Mm-hmm. And what are the processes that are being metered out right now that they're not aware of. Mm-hmm. And how all that you're experiencing is driven by what you all have said to us. I said, look, you all said to us in the inclusion, I said, I know you. I said, 70% of you have said to us that your immediate supervisors respect you and they value your input. 70%. Now, that means 30% doesn't, but 70%, your immediate supervisor, you have a good relationship with. I said, then you said that it is their manager and the higher-ups who don't understand what I do, who are the most troubling because they're making decisions in my area without inviting my input. I said, and so they started nodding their heads like, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right. Mm-hmm. So now I got to show you that I've studied you. Yeah. I said, now what you all said to us is that we're not listened to enough, that people do not seek out our perspective enough. The only time we see our bosses is when there's problems. If there's, good news, we don't hear about that. And so and we don't feel safe to speak the truth. Mm-hmm. And so I said, so what did we do? We've got 5 trainings that they have to get: competencies, empathic listening, psychological safety, perspective taking, a sense of belonging, and inclusive leadership. Those came from you all. I said, we haven't just trained them 3 times on the skills. We are also coaching them around those skills and now holding them accountable. We now have an evaluation instrument that is going to be tied to their money. Yeah. Did you all know that? Mm-hmm.
Did not know. Mm-hmm.
But your voice suggests that we need to make sure we're educating you. Mm-hmm. So sometimes frustration comes from a lack of knowledge about what changes are happening. And I said, look at the evaluation that we have for them. I said, guess what? They cannot work it out with their boss, sit around, pinky swear together that we're going to give you a superior rating. Mm-hmm. The only way they get a superior rating is if you say that. Mm-hmm. So that's in the superior section. It's feedback from your employees has to rate you as superior. You can't get it any other way.
That's good.
And they were looking at that like,
yeah.
So it was really A powerful experience. I told him, I said, look, I said, your last union president who just retired from the company said he started off as a huge opponent to DEIB. He left a huge advocate. He says, I believe in this. He said this to the senior leadership. He said, but I'm fear that it's not going to survive or thrive because white employees are going to reject it because of all the negative influences that they're getting outside. And that Black employees are going to reject it because they don't believe that it's bringing about change fast enough. Yeah. And so I told every class, I said, whatever you thought about your last union president, here's what he said. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what say you?
What say you?
Yeah. I said, I agree with it, that potential is here.
Yep.
But now you have a decision to make. I said, because your CEO cannot change the whole culture by himself. You all are going to have to buy in and participate in this place becoming what it needs to be. Yep. So I value that. But Tommy, you know how it is, man. And then the second section, start off with an Asian female start swinging. But by that time, I was like, that's a great point. Thanks. Moving right on. I mean, right. I regave. I gave it a last section. I'm not gonna take no public from you, And then she calmed down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
This is 100% management, and they've been doing this for 25 years. We can't change anything. I hear you. So it sounds like what you're saying is this is all over from your point of view. Well, thanks. Anybody want to join in?
No one?
Okay.
All right.
So that's how my week was, man. And today, thank you, Tommy. Today, what we want to talk about, Tommy and I, is there are a couple of things. We're going to ask you all to weigh in as well. As you know, this is Father's Day weekend.
Yes, sir.
Weekend. Judy didn't like me saying weekend. She wanted to give me that one day. I said, no, the kids have taught me. And they take their birthdays, the birthday month. They celebrate the whole month. So I'm at least going to get the weekend. So this is Father's Day weekend, and we're going to talk a little bit about fathers. And then Juneteenth is going to be celebrated on the 19th, June 19th. And we're talk a little bit about that. But then there was something that Tommy and I are liberated to talk about on our show that we really don't talk about or acknowledge much in our daily lives. Tommy and I are organizational effectiveness consultants. But one of the areas that we specialize in is DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility. And in our work, we have to be fair and balanced, and we have to be sort of dealing with all of the different kinds of diversity issues that may arise in the workplace. And so we don't get a chance to talk directly about race for extended periods of time. And in many ways, I don't know how many of you saw the movie the Secret Society of Magical Negroes. That name in and of itself is a mouthful. Yeah. But the premise in that movie is that there's a secret society that said that what we're trying to do is make sure that white people feel comfortable. Because when they don't feel comfortable, bad things happen to Black people. And so this sort of mentor was showing this young man, see that cop over there? He's having a frustrated day. We got to make sure, get him an ice cream sandwich or something, We got to make sure that he stays calm and peaceful, because if he gets frustrated, then bad things happen to us. Yeah. And I would say to you, when I saw that movie, I was so devastated by how many things that we do in order to not offend white people or the dominant culture. And when I say that, I'm not talking about everybody white, but it's just when you start thinking about survival, that it's not a good survival strategy to be critical of the people who have the greatest amount of power in our country. But when I look at Father's Day, it causes us to think about, Tommy, all of the numbers of defeat around the Black father. And it's almost now common rhetoric to say the demise of the Black family is because, everything that's wrong with the Black community is because of fathers. Right. It's because the Black father has shirked his responsibility. And Tommy, as I started doing research, just preparing for this conversation, it's just unbelievable the things that have happened to us. I'll give it to you in a nutshell, and then we'll talk about Juneteenth. If we look at just big periods of time, and there's dispute on all of these, but if you look at slavery in this country from 1619, when the first slave was brought here to Virginia, to 1865, we were enslaved in this country. And just all the things that happened through slavery, there's certainly some information that we may have time to go over. And then from 1865 to 1965, we had the Jim Crow laws, which really followed on the heels of slavery to try to keep us under control and marginalized and second-class citizens. And then the Civil Rights Act sort of was supposed to liberate us and set us free and make everything equal. And then 10 years later, we had the war on drugs. And the war on drugs was in many ways a war on Black people. And it was a war on street level drug dealing, not the big people who had all the money that were backing this.
Right.
Never got those. Right. But the street people, who was us, were getting incarcerated and throwing away the key. And then if you look at all of the probational systems, if you look at juvenile court and how many young African-American males are bound over as adults, I mean, we get put in that system, another sort of example of latter-day slavery, and it's hard to ever get out of it. And then when you get out of it, it's hard to ever get yourself back to a place where you can get a job and work a meaningful life. So there are all these structural things that happened in our background that have led to some of the inequities that we see today and disparities that we see today. Tommy and I are of the mindset we can make things happen because we were raised by families, fathers, mothers who said you can do anything. So that's our mindset. But the fact that you have a mindset that you can do everything does not eliminate some of the structural things that will affect your business success, and everything like that. And it's just, it's sad that race has been used in such a negative way in this country right up unto today.
Yep.
That we're seeing structural things that are being put in place to sort of dismiss, to marginalize, to discount anything that we do. Now DEI is getting attacked, trying to throw it all out, but also trying to use it to say that any Black person's success has been a result of some kind of tokenism and reverse discrimination against whites.
Yep.
And the fact that in this country, we quietly sit back and accept those narratives are things that are impactful on this Father's Day weekend. We want to explore just a few of those and how they impact fathers. But then we want to go further and we want to explore your own father, your relationship with him, and all the other fathers in your life of any color that have made a difference for you. Let's talk about Juneteenth first, Tommy. Thoughts?
Yeah, Juneteenth, 1863. The president of the United States at that time, Abraham Lincoln, he signs the Emancipation Proclamation that deems that slavery basically is over and that those enslaved individuals are now free. I'm still perplexed to this day, Eric, and I've studied this. I used to teach this at the collegiate level at Fisk University. I am perplexed that even in those days where communication was basically through on horseback, right? That it took a little north of 2 years for the news of the Emancipation Proclamation to make it from the East Coast, basically Washington, D.C., the Philadelphia area, all the way down to Galveston, Texas. I'm perplexed.
Right.
But it did. It took 2+ years
of additional free labor.
Now, when it comes to fighting the war, communication was quick and swift.
Right.
It's Confederates versus the Union. It was swift, right? The courier pigeon could not get there fast enough.
Right.
But with regards to, oh yeah, our slaves are now free. take your time getting that message over there to them.
Right.
Take your time. And so Juneteenth, June 19th, our communities in Texas, the state of Texas, who had not so far have moved and fought against the separation from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So Texas, in that southern region of the United States, was still kind of rearing off of being Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Mexican territory that was owned by another country in Europe, other countries, be it France or Spanish, etc. But now our enslaved people are set free. That was the message.
Right.
That's all that was, Eric, real quick. That was the message. It was a message that Black folks are free. The slaves are free.
Right.
That did not overnight change the mindset, the attitude, even the behaviors of those enslaved,
right,
and those who were enslaving, and those who were impartial.
Right.
So every white person was not a slave owner, right?
Right.
But they had the privilege of living in a discriminatory environment,
right,
an offensive environment. So there is some privilege that was baked into simply the laws that were prohibiting people from a particular race of having access to the general population. That's important,
right,
because the communication that the enslaved people were indeed free, that was initially given to the people in power in Texas.
Right.
The slaves were not told that.
No.
Right.
No. So they knew slavery's over.
Yeah.
The people in power.
Yeah, they knew.
But it wasn't until General came down there and announced it to the slaves. They're like, what?
Indeed.
We free?
We are. Who said that? Oh, they said that 2.5 years ago. What?
Right.
So it also had to happen too in Texas. When that news was received, particularly in the tardiness in the fashion that it was received, there was always the Nat Turner attitude. In other words, for those who are less familiar, Nat Turner was an enslaved African who led a revolt toward freedom. Literally wanted enslaved people to be free.
Right.
The pursuit of freedom and happiness. That was the core. So when the news came in and folks said 2.5 years, they felt, oh, you all are hoodwinking us. We've been bamboozled. We are about to raise, and before they can say up, right, there was the powers that be began to squash and literally transition into brutality and violence to be able to squash any uprising.
Right.
And so that too started to permeate throughout Texas, Louisiana, going into Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, etc. But Juneteenth is a celebration of freedom.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right.
It's not just a diatribe on one culture. It is the celebration of freedom. If it's freedom of any people's, right, their inalienable rights to be free, to pursue happiness, to have equality and equal access to opportunities to others. So I appreciate Juneteenth as a day, as a week, as a moment, but fundamentally, the concept of Juneteenth runs through my veins and why I personally do the work in DEI and B. I think that there are people, be it lower rung folks who are labor versus management, for example, all people, we want to be free to do our job without making one mistake and then it hurting generations down the path, down the line. Juneteenth, again, is a celebration.
Right. So we're going to encourage you to take time out this week to celebrate Juneteenth, a commemoration of freedom. It has historical significance for us. And if you think about it, to be set free, the general comes into your town, Galveston, Texas, says you're free. There's a hooray, and then there's a oh no.
Yeah.
Well, what do I do? Because they're not happy that I got set free. So now hit the road, Jack.
Yeah.
With whatever you got in your little cabin or tent, then you had to start hitting the road to freedom. Now, how are you going to feed yourself and everything else? And so it's reflection on progress, recognition of those that came before us. Juneteenth is an American holiday just established as a federal holiday by Joe Biden in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so how much delayed is that from, so delay is really in the picture for us. Tommy, I want to transition to sort of looking at 10 of the most significant ways in which Black individuals and families were dehumanized and the role of the Black father was undermined by slavery. Number one, family separation, physical violence, and brutal punishments were part of the slavery experience. And in this country, a lot of people don't want you to even mention slavery. The point of view is, I wasn't there. I didn't have anything to do with it. Don't mention the trauma that you as a people experience, through slavery. But families were separated just to maintain control over them, just to make sure that you had to understand that marriage was illegal, that you are property. And so I don't want you to act like a father, because then you all might start banding together and feeling more like humans. Yeah. And so we're going to sell you off to different places randomly. And then sort of the physical violence and brutality and rape that was happening in the midst of slavery are things that have a huge impact. There are behaviors within the Black community that you can trace back. There are fears. There are tendencies that you can trace back to the trauma of slavery. Thoughts?
So, Eric, we look back at one documentary called Africa, the Magnificent Cake. You can take a look at it. It's an older movie. It's a documentary, and it really articulates how slavery came into its institutional system in America. It began years before that, decades before that. So as we talk about 1619, with slavery, the institution began in Americas, it was being practiced and exploited in South America, in the Caribbeans, in the Mexico territories, those countries, etc. Before it came and landed here, there was people, i.e. this chattel, enslaved people, who are already in the pipeline to start in 1619. And so then when it started, it really picked up. In the documentary, it talks about, in studies report as well, that there's one particular country, i.e. culture, that was infamous with its terrorism with regards to slavery, and that's the Portuguese. The Portuguese established a violent practice of beheading and dismemberment. And so if you do your history, when you look at photos, and believe it or not, there are photos of these instances in slavery days, because we were capturing that. So simply a slave owner or those who are working, with the slave owner, plantation owner, they can go into any slave pen at any time with male, female children in there and pull out any enslaved person, which they did. And oftentimes what they would do is make an example by pulling out the male and decapitating him, cutting his head off and put his head on a stake. Put his head on a stake and put it in the center of the plantation, or even the village square. So sometimes you would have 8, 9, 10 different stakes with heads on them, Also, they would sever the hands, sometimes the feet, and castrate the men.
Right.
So that, just seeing that, if you can visualize that as a person today,
Right.
being in your home, someone raiding your home and cutting off the head in front of you of your loved one, or having your 11, 12, 13-year-old daughter raped in front of you,
Right.
and you have no power,
Right.
right? Unless you want to be headless, handless, feetless, and on a spike.
Right.
That's an option.
Right.
Right. And so that psychological impact of violence in slavery, the brutal punishments, the separation of family, really was part of creating the enslaved mentality. So we can envision this. Some of us are familiar with the board game Monopoly. And Monopoly is a strategic real estate game. It could take 4, 5, 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you have some folks that invited you over to the house to play a game of have an evening of Monopoly. It's going to take 6 hours, but then they invite you 3 hours into the game. You get there, all the property is taken up. All of the money, for the most part, is within other people's hands.
Right. All divvied up.
Right. Now, there are some cards that are still available, not the property cards, not the get out of jail cards, but there are cards that go, literally straight to jail.
Right.
Straight to prison.
Those are the ones we were getting there.
Right? So we get that. And then so we start the game 3 hours in. We have very, very, if any, financial resources. There's no property left.
Mm-hmm.
We actually cannot even trade for the property. And you know what? Those who have already been playing decide to change the rules without letting us know.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're playing the game in a major deficit, the rules of the game are being changed. And so that's what slavery has been when we look at denial of legal rights, right, et cetera. When we look at forced labor, forced labor was enslavement, but then we came out of that. We used to have in this country child labor, right? We were working at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. There were some significant fires and or events that women and children were killed. And so the government had to enforce some rules that corporations will follow, because before, corporations and companies ruled the land. Mm-hmm. They dictated to the government what needed to be happening. That was slavery, right?
Right.
It was industry in the South that dictated that we need slavery.
Yeah, you're not taking away our property.
Not all. And so those are a few things, Eric, to just call to mind. This is all through celebration, and celebration is through awareness and knowledge.
Right.
We have to know, and we have to act upon.
And then if you look at it, and so much of this is so connected to us. I mean, we look at it as history, but it's connected to us. After slavery, there was sharecropping. My grandfather was a sharecropper. And so sharecropping was where you got a chance to work some land and then ultimately maybe be able to buy that land. But the rules kept changing. The markers kept being moved. And so you actually could never win. You were in this thing where you were constantly trying to buy your property and your land, but could never catch up with it. If you look at Jim Crow laws and racial segregation that was brought down, if you look at separate but unequal education, if you look at even the lynchings, as I was thinking about what you were talking about, so lynchings that happened through Jim Crow periods where we were hung, Black men especially, at parties, at picnics and community celebrations, and our bodies dangled in the air, 5 or 6 people, as the majority community would sit around and have a picnic. So it was literally traumatizing to us, but it was socializing and almost acceptance of an anti-human kind of depiction of people of color, which continues on to today. So the news media every night sort of hangs out the blacks that have done crimes on a regular basis in ways that are disproportionate to the amount of crime that we actually are engaged in. And those things continue to perpetuate a mindset that we are less than. And so Tommy and I are wanting to expose a bit of this, remind us of these kinds of things while we're in the midst of repeating them. And if the norms of the day say that you're never supposed to talk about this history because it's going to make somebody uncomfortable, well, try living it.
Yeah.
And then see what that feels like. And so as we look at the Black father and the love that he has for his family and his children, you have to understand what kind of brutality and history it has come out of. It's amazing that we have any sort of pride and strength and fight left in us at all.
Yep.
When you were so, what's the word, Tommy? So taught, so it was almost a habit that you needed to fear the dominant culture and the power structure. And if you did anything like look your master in their eyes or talk back or anything like that, you're going to get a beat down.
Yeah.
And so we know in animals that although an elephant can pull up a stake, when they tie that elephant up as a baby elephant, by the time it grows up, it can pull away, but it doesn't know it because it's been tied up its whole life. That's in many ways what has happened to us throughout the history of this country. And what we do have is resilience. Tommy and I are not purveyors of excuses where you can just sit in a hole, say there's a reason why I'm in this hole and I can't get up out of here. But I think people do have to understand that there is a history that has brought us up to today. And there are things that are going on right now strategically to dismantle any systems that would create equity and fairness.
So when we look at the plight of human beings across the globe as it aligns to discrimination, enslavement, sometimes human trafficking, it's phenomenal, I think, that in this country, for example, I'm going to refer to 3 different ethnic groups. So in this country, we have indigenous peoples, which are a multitude of ethnic groups, tribes, etc. And when the dominant culture wanted what they wanted, which was first land and then resources, their effort was not to share and cohabitate on this land, but to exterminate. And so the government, as well as the people, the dominant culture, began a system and structures to eliminate and or exterminate our indigenous brethren.
Right.
Have they succeeded all the way? No, because we still have Native Americans that live amongst and with us.
Right.
But there was an effort to move them from one part of where they come from to another, et cetera, and then just go into war to kill them all. That's one ethnic group. Another ethnic group is, as slavery was being formalized in Europe, there were efforts to go into both China and Asia Pacific, as well as India. So when these countries that wanted to enslave humans went into India, they found that it was more difficult and less profitable to move the volume of Indians to America to work the land, because the Indians on the continent, they had a different approach to land and to work. But when those Europeans went to Africa, who had a different work ethic, they were incredible workers. They were sophisticated, coming from Egypt
Right.
some 5,000 or 7,000
Brilliant.
years before,
Right.
all the way down to Ethiopia, into Central Africa, and down to the bottom. We're looking at South Africa. So there was an effort initially to go into West Africa and to kidnap, maim, kill, restructure the mindset of those people, and then bring them over to the Americas. With all that being said, Black folks in America are still here and growing.
Right.
And for some people in the dominant culture, they still see this as a threat, an existential, ongoing threat.
Right.
The threat that how could these people, not the indigenous folks, not the Indians, not the Asians, how could these people still survive, if not thrive? We have to create systems that benefit us to keep us in power, even if there's a perception that we are fighting against each other. We'll put that perception. Right. So we'll have these Democrats and Republicans, independents fighting against each other, but the policy is still subjugation and oppression. And we as African Americans still survive. We as underrepresented and marginalized folks still survive.
Right.
Because there's something special about the spirit of us.
Right.
Again, not just African American,
right,
but those of us who are unseen, unheard, undervalued. There's something special that we are reminded that we are as valuable as any other human being, regardless of the status in the community. So at the end of the day, I would like to offer up that awareness, knowledge, empathy, right? And we always talk about, Eric, love.
Right. I'm so grateful for, Tommy, your history background and expertise, because people that don't know their history are destined to potentially repeat that. As we look at just about 5 minutes left in our show today, Tommy, I'm going to take a stab at it, and then I want you to talk about the men, the fathers that have been important in your life. Certainly, my father was both my hero and my lesson. As I tell my own children that your mother and I are going to give you a number of assets that your life is going to benefit from. And there are some things that we might do that you'll have to recover from. So that certainly is the truth from my father to my grandfather. My grandfather's on both sides. On my father's side, my grandfather had a third grade education. He was a farmer. He got up at 3:34 in the morning and farmed the land. All he knew was work. That's the way he raised his 12 children, is that you all will be farmers and you'll work from sun up to sundown. And so that work ethic that I have today has come from down through my lineage. The fact that my father was an entrepreneur and my grandfather was an entrepreneur is the independent streak that I have that says that you can build something from your hands. My mother's father was a painter. And so he bought houses. He was also an alcoholic. And so my grandfather on my mother's side was a womanizer, and so those things. And so you get down from that, both good news and bad news. But how much of the drinking, how much of the womanizing was a result of trying to mask over the pain and the trauma that you had experienced down through the years? There are other men that I could think about. I could go on and on, but I want to get you in here, Tommy. The janitor in my high school, Mr. Murdoch, was like a father to so many of us at a time when we didn't have very many Black teachers. The head janitor was someone who was always watching and looking out for us, and a voice that could potentially speak up for us if injustices occurred. Tommy, who were the people, the fathers in your life that had?
So I never met my father's father, which would be my grandfather, because he was from Macon, Georgia. And in 1946, 1947, as the railroad boom was developing in the industrial age, coming out of Georgia, Atlanta, Macon, etc., my grandfather had worked on then the railroad chain gang. So I wanted to call it out that way because chain gang is also affiliated with criminals and chain gang. But this is the railroad chain gang where they worked the railroad. They drove the stakes, they put the rails down. And as my grandfather and the crew were laying track, they were bringing a track together to connect Macon, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia. And the train was on its way from Atlanta and it was getting closer, closer, closer. They weren't finished laying the track. And the superintendent, the manager, told everyone that was laying the track, all African Americans, to continue to lay track. And all of them were hit and killed by the train. My grandfather was one of them. So my father was only 6 years old at the time, or 7. And so I never met my father's father. My mother's father, Benjamin Wilson, he was a carpenter. I always knew him as a heavy-set, muscular, bald-headed man who smoked stogies, very short cigars, right? And I had learned from my mother that her father, Benjamin, was not really a people person at all. That was not the experience that I had with my grandfather. As an infant and a toddler, I remember really 3 things. One, that I had to ask him for anything I wanted in his house.
Right.
I knew that.
You didn't touch nothing on your own.
Didn't touch anything on my own. 2, what I could touch after giving permission, that he had a tray of pennies and coins, and I could reach with his approval. I can reach into that. He said, I can keep anything I can hold in my hand.
Right.
Right. And I remember that I used to open my little hand as big as I could to grab it.
And they would drop it out.
Right. And at the same time, as I grabbed it and I would hold it, I don't know, I may have had 10 cents, 20 cents. And he would laugh with this cigar, right? Like, deep laugh. He said, reach in with your other hand.
Right.
And I'll go reaching in and I'll have my 30 cents.
Right.
And he taught me the one, that my hands and my mind can create a living. It can make money for me.
Right.
He did. He says, but control only what you can control. Right. Any money that's not in your hand, it's not for you to manage or control because you don't have it in your hand. It's not yours. And my grandfather taught me that. And my father, who I am his namesake, I am Tommy Lee Lewis Jr. My father has the exact same name. He gave me my name. So I live every day remembering my father, so much so that when my father passed away in 2006, there were a number of folks around me, loved ones, friends, even legal people saying, are you going to drop the junior from your name? I immediately said, no. He said, well, your father has passed. You don't have to keep junior because I will always be my father's son. So my Father's Day is not only the blessing that I'm a father, but a celebration of my own father, his father, my parents' fathers, and the fathers that have been throughout the generations that I don't know anything about, but I'm standing on their shoulders on Father's Day and every day of my life.
And I would say, as we draw this session to a close, that man, this time blew by. That as we think about Father's Day and this weekend, you can't find 2 men who have greater love for their children than Tommy Lewis and Eric Ellis. I'm grateful for the father that I had and all the things that I learned from him, the grandfathers that I had on both sides, the great grandfather that I knew on my mother's side. But being a father is a gift. Unfortunately, most of the world has no idea of the depth of love and conviction that Black men have as fathers for their children. And so I hope there's some things that we shared with you today that might be of educational value. But one thing that cannot be taken away from us is the beauty, the power, the gift of being fathers. So for all of you out there that are fathers, I want to say to you, happy Father's Day. For those of you that are mothers that are operating as mothers and fathers, happy Father's Day to you as well. And until we meet again, take care of each other, love one another until we see each other again.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.